4:01. Welcome, everyone. Open the 15th meeting of the Planning Environment Committee. Please check the city website for additional meeting detail information. Meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenapehoik, and Attawandaron. We honor and respect the history, languages, and cultures of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact pec@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. At this time, I'll ask for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we have no consent items today, so we'll be moving right on to our scheduled items. 3.1, first item is public participation meeting regarding 1588 Clark Road. So I'll look for a motion to open that. PPM, Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We have the staff report. Are there any questions of a technical nature at this time? Seeing none, then I'll look to see if the applicant would like to address the committee. Please give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon to members of committee. My name is Alexandra Hassan with Sifton Properties, the applicant and owner of the lands. I'd first like to extend a thank you to staff for bringing this report before committee this afternoon. We have reviewed the report and we are in favor of the recommendation to remove the property at 1588 Clark Road from the Registry of Cultural Heritage Resources. I would also like to note to members of committee that Sifton is open to opportunities to commemorate the historic contributions of the family that is tied to this property as part of future development of the property. Thank you for your time, and I am available for questions if there's any questions of committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll look for anyone from the public that would like to address the committee. Please give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
All right, my name is Leslie Tackaberry, and I am here to ask the council to save the house. This house is one of the last remaining relics of the Grove community, and it represents the family that contributed significantly to its development. The Tackaberry family were very early pioneers that were part of a family unit that traveled here together from New York. They were from some of the first settlers in the area and worked together to build a community that lasted over 100 years in the same location. Many descendants of this community still exist in London today. The early pioneer settlement was established before the War of 1812. It grew and eventually had its own church, school, post office, railway stop, and cemetery. The Grove Cemetery is located at 1425 Huron Street, and the earliest known burial in the Grove Cemetery is 1823. Decoration service is held annually and is attended by many each year. My father is a member of the board of directors and has been for many years as well. Although there are a few other houses still standing from this community, this house is special. This is the house of John Tackaberry and Elizabeth Belton, who donated their land and contributed to the building of the Grove Church and the Grove School. It represents their Wesleyan beginnings and their decision to become Canadians. The house is also significant as it operated as the home of the London Township Mutual Insurance Company and was operated by 3 generations of Tackaberrys. This company was an early insurance cooperative for farmers to prevent and reduce fire losses. They also introduced the concept of carrying fire extinguishers on tractors to reduce losses. It eventually merged with Middlesex Mutual Insurance Company, and recently the company has undergone another merger but is still in operations to this day. This house represents the rich history of the Tackerbury family and is one that is shared by many Londoners. This house was lived in by 38 of my direct ancestors, 7 of my living relatives, and myself. This house has been lived in by 6 generations over the span of over 180 years of Tackerburys. And I'm respectfully, again, requesting the city deny the request for demolition. The house was also built on the first land granted in the London Township. It was originally granted to John Hale as a strategic military location with high-quality farmland. Later maps in 1818 indicate the property is granted with no name, and Nathaniel Tackerbury is listed on the bottom right-hand corner of the map in pencil, indicating that he'd likely had applied for a land grant from Simcoe. The house was built by my great-great-great-grandparents. John Tackerbury was the son of Nathaniel Tackerbury and Sarah Newsom. They were natives of Ireland that fled due to religious persecution during the 1798 uprising. This family left Ireland in 1806, arrived in Eaton, New York in 1807. There are also records of Nathaniel and his family arriving in Pennsylvania in 1810. Nathaniel was a veteran of the Revolutionary War and was recruited to go to Upper Canada and take up farming to provide supplies to the British military. During the War of 1812, he was caught by the American military while traveling along the river. He was arrested and forced to declare his allegiance to the United States of America. Nathaniel had a homestead in Eaton with many family members living there at the time. It was a dangerous time to be a loyalist in New York, so he and his son James declared and stayed in Eaton. However, they were not permitted to own land for 5 years. James married Anne Belton, the daughter of John Belton and Huldah Webster. Nathaniel and James became successful hop growers and had many children, and they are all buried in Eaton, New York. Sadly, Nathaniel was not granted land in Upper Canada because he became an American citizen. The Belton family was also arrested as British military pensioners living in New York. However, they did not declare their allegiance to the U.S. and came to Canada shortly after. John Tackerbury made his way to Upper Canada with the Belton family, as there are family letters to allude to the fact that he may have been in hiding. The Belton family had been up here very early as well. John Belton had a homestead in the Whiten, which was another early pioneer settlement closely connected to the Grove. The Tackerbury homestead is halfway between the home of Robert Webster and the home of John Belton. John married Elizabeth Belton after the death of her father in 1828, which was the beginning, regardless. They likely returned to Eaton to bury Elizabeth's father. This is also the year that their first child, Sarah Ann Tackerbury, was born in New York.
30 seconds.
They inherited $300 and came back to Canada with their young child in early 1829. They lived in their 2-story log cabin, and their child, Nathaniel Tackerbury, was born the next day. This is also likely the year the house was built. They had 12 children in total, 11 living to adulthood, many of their descendants making noteworthy contributions to the community. This modest community began as a group of Methodists and strong abolitionists. The first Wesleyan sermon in London Township was recorded in 1818
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
at Robert Webster's house by Samuel Belton. After the War of 1812, Samuel was also a circuit rider through the area and had relationships with many of the natives. This would have been Elizabeth's older brother and the nephew of Robert Webster. John and Elizabeth converted to Wesleyan in 1828. It's also reasonable to believe that the community was a station in the Underground Railroad assisting escaped slaves and freed slaves from New York.
Ms. Tackerbury, I have to ask you to end now. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to address the committee?
She's going to continue for me. All you have to do is read, honey.
Can I have your name, please?
Grace.
Please go ahead.
John Tackerbury also fought in the militia to protect his home and family during the Fenian raids. The Tackerbury also comes from a long line of Masons, with my great-grandfather Victor, Deputy Grand Master, being awarded with his 3rd degree at Homestead. This house has been there to see it all. It was there during the Fenian raids and the Underground Railroad, the incorporation of the city, the abolition of the slavery U.S., the American Civil War, confederation of our country with development development of railroad, the TB outbreak, the invention of electricity, WWI, the Spanish flu, WWII,
World War II. Keep going.
and so on. It was there before the bridge, the dam, the airport, the conservation area. It has stood the test of time, and it is a shame that the city did not list this property as historical when they were previously given the opportunity. It has been left open, unprotected, and treated poorly. These pioneers cleared that land, planted orchids and crops. They built roads and created a community. They should not be forgotten today. The Grove community had no recognition by the City of London as having any historical significance. Removing relics like this one destroy the cultural heritage of our community and eliminates important aspects of our local history. These are currently
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
multiple proposals affecting the use of land which this house sits, a widening on Veterans Memorial Parkway, the upgrade of the bridge on Clark Road, and proposed subdivision by Sifton. Today, there appears to be significant concern regarding to the subdivision and
No approval at this.
approval at this time. It should not be permitted to demolish a heritage property for an unapproved plan. The Sifton family has also been in this area a very long time. Their company claims to be a family-run business, and they have commemorated their own family history in the Burr Cemetery and are about to want to do the same to celebrate their 100 years in operation. They clearly value their own history and should understand others wanting to do the same and why this property is so important. They claim to support projects that preserve and enhance the environment while enriching the lives of the people in those communities. It sounds like both the Tacaperi and Sifton family stand for the same thing. Unfortunately, these actions do not align or support their mission. Secondly, approving the demolition of this house will confirm that demolition is by neglect acceptable to the City of London. The treatment of this property has been shameful. In 2019, the city approved the demolition of the barn because it had been damaged while demolishing the silo. At that time, the house was considered in excellent condition as per the historical assessment
30 seconds.
Performed by the city. There were tenants living in the house until 2020. When the former tenants left, the home was left open and unoccupied until now. It's become a favorite for urban explorers and is now in shameful condition as the pieces of history are pilfered away. However, the exterior of the house remains in good condition. I request that the house be treated with the respect that it deserves. It should be added to the historical register, repaired, and remain standing as a symbol of our humble beginnings here in what was once London Township. Any
Okay,
further
I'm gonna have
development of
to-
this land should
I'm
incorporate
getting
this
extra
home
time here.
as a.
I'll ask that we have other people that would like to address the committee.
I have one
Thank you very
sentence.
much.
One sentence?
One sentence?
One sentence.
One sentence.
Any further development of this land should incorporate this home and its existing landscape.
Okay, thank you. Any others that would like to address the committee on this? Please go ahead. You have 5 minutes, and give us your name, please.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Krista Hart. I am the landowner to the north of, on the north side of Kaleli Road, across from the property in question. I guess I would just like to speak to what's been going on there the last 3 years. This property, as well as the property down the road, 2331 Kaleli Road, have been unoccupied for close to 3 years and have been completely neglected, unkept, and unsecured. Although I completely understand and respect Ms. Tackaberry's request to save this property with its cultural significance, we have had to deal with multiple cases of break-ins at both properties, unwanted visitors, people ditching stolen cars there. The list goes on. The police have been called in the last 10 months 6 or 7 times to deal with altercations. I have a small family, a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 6-month-old. My wife doesn't feel safe taking our kids outside to play on our lawn because there's people around, which is a direct result of the lack of care and maintenance and security at these homes, which is a reflection on the property managers. So I see 2 routes forward. 1, they have to be maintained, they have to be monitored, security, kept up with lawn maintenance, et cetera, the list goes on, or they have to be demolished. And it's unfortunate that it's come to this because these were 2 properties that were lovingly cared for a long, long time, not only by Ms. Tackaberry's family, but by the Flynn family as well, who had multiple generations of their family living in that house as well. So they also own the house we live in. So I just wanted to kind of make that relevant. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to address the committee on this issue? Please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Bruce Johnson. I reside at 1511 Clark Road, directly west of the Tackaberry property. And I've lived there all my life, farming it. And I rent the agricultural land around the house that I wish to speak in favor of demolition of all the buildings on the property. Since the sellers of this property moved out, meaning the Tackaberrys, in late 2008, this property has been vacant, say for 2 or 3 years when an employee of the owner lived there. In its years of vacancy, trespassers have entered the house numerous times, causing many visits from police. Feeble attempts to board the buildings up have been made, but buildings are broken into again. When questioned why they don't do a better job of boarding it up, or if they're just waiting for someone to strike a match, a smirk is made. The abandoned buildings are now a haven for trespassers, causing problems for neighbors, especially the family on the north side of Kaleli Road. And just 17 days ago, I personally had a trespasser enter my house, taking footwear and a blanket. Now, London police were good, but all the neighbors have a right to buildings being kept at a certain standard. I am asking that all buildings be demolished as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others that would like to address the committee? I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone in the online or in the other rooms.
Louis Marzano, would you like to speak right now?
Mr. Mazzano, if you can hear us, this is your time. Please let us know if you'd like to address the committee.
I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Kyle Mazzoni. I am the real estate lead for Tesla Canada, and I am thrilled to be in attendance today. Thank you for having me. I just really wanted to say thank you and we're extremely
Sir,
excited.
I'm gonna cut you off. You're addressing, I think, the next item. No, 3.5. Or, sorry. You're addressing 3274 and 3234 Wonderland Road. We are on 1588 Clark Road. So you might want to hold your comments till we get to the item that you are probably here to talk about.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other persons that would like to speak to 1588 Clark Road? Okay, seeing none, I'll look for motion to close PPM. Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Frank, and I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, committee, we have a recommendation from staff, so I'll open the floor now for committee members. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll move the staff recommendation.
Can I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hillier has indicated he will second the motion. So now I'll open the floor for questions or comments regarding the motion in front of us. Councillor Cuddy.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, and thank you for allowing me to attend the committee session today. I'd like to begin, and I'll be brief, Chair. I'd like to begin by thanking staff for the extensive and the exhaustive work you've done on this study. A year ago, by the way, I will speaking in favor of demolition of this property. A year ago, right now, this month, when I was canvassing, campaigning in Kalele and Clark Side Road, I met both Mr. Johnson and Mr. DeHart. And my conversation with Mr. DeHart, I remember more clearly, and he said, Peter, if by any chance you happen to win this election, please demolish these buildings. They're a hazard. They're a hazard to our children. They're a fire hazard, and we need to have them removed immediately. And since that time, I've been working with both Mr. DeHart and Mr. Johnson to accomplish that. And the properties, unfortunately, could have been saved, I think, long term. And I'm so sorry to your family that these buildings are in the condition they're in today, because I don't believe that they should have been left to fall in disrepair like they have. But to be truthful, Chair, these buildings are an absolute hazard. All of them on the property, they need to be removed immediately. I spoke from this seat not many months ago about what good corporate citizens the owners of these properties were, but today I have to say that they haven't done a good job at maintaining these properties, and they could have. So unfortunately, we've had properties that could have been saved, that could have been revitalized, but they can't. They're far too gone now, and I would highly encourage all members of committee to follow staff recommendation and have these buildings demolished. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to thank the family for speaking to the heritage that is really important to you. I was trying to imagine myself standing up there speaking to the history of where I live and the importance. And it is very difficult. We always find ourselves in these difficult situations here when it comes to deserted properties and what do we do with them and how do we restore them, or can we, and how do we retain them? And I wonder if I can just start off through you, Mr. Chair, just asking that question on how we can we do a better job when it comes to especially the heritage buildings to keep them to certain standards. I'm not exactly sure what standards they would be, but what do we follow and what opportunities do we have as a city to provide this safety in the community and the protection for these buildings?
I'll go to staff with that question.
Thank you, and through the chair, the property of 1588 Clark Road is presently only listed on the Register of Cultural Heritage Resources. So that means it's treated just like any other property in the City of London in terms of property standards. I believe, Councillor Hopkins, you might have been alluding to or asking about the enhanced minimum standards for heritage designated properties. And unfortunately, that's only available to properties that are designated either in a heritage conservation district or individually. And in that circumstance, when a property is designated, there's an enhanced ability to ensure that its heritage attributes are being maintained and it's being properly cared for. Of course, it's not a perfect system as it is complaints driven, but that's where we're really able to work and ensure that the properties that are significant, the properties that are valued, the properties that are designated under the Ontario Heritage Act are properly conserved.
Councillor.
Yeah, so this is a listed property, so there are no protections. And I wonder, how do we get out of that cycle of properties maybe designated but aren't, and how do we protect them from being sort of fallen in disarray? Because I'm sure this isn't the only building that we have in our city. Unless it comes forward for designation and we're here and it's obvious from the staff's recommendation that maybe we are too late, I am encouraged that the owner is encouraged to do a commemorative plaque or whatever that looks like. I think that is extremely important, and I maybe follow up to I know it's in our recommendation that happen. How, in our recommendation, we're encouraging it. How do we know that that is going to happen? Through you.
Go to staff.
Thank you for that question, and you were very careful in your wording, as we were as well. As the property is only listed, the question before you tonight is really designate or not, and it's not possible to attach any true terms and conditions. So that's why you're seeing a recommendation like encourage or be requested in terms of that commemoration. You read in the staff report that we do believe the Tackaberry family has historical significance. However, a property has to meet 2 or more criteria as a minimum to merit designation, hence the staff recommendation before you tonight to recommending the property be removed from the register. What might be a great idea to see is when we do see that subdivision move forward, that we look for some information from the property owner to be included in that future staff recommendation on that subdivision application. I understand we're still some time out from that, but that might be something to look forward to.
Councillor.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And through you, I'm going to be brief. I appreciate that the properties and the house in particular has some attachment to the family. There's family history there. Almost every family in London has a place in the city that matters to them from their past point of view. But as Mr. Gagne was relating, the evaluation criteria requires 2 of 9 to even consider. And we don't always designate with 2 of 9 or even 3 of 9. It is still subject to the will of council, but in this case, only 1 of the 9 conditions were met. And the property owner today does envision a redevelopment of the land. Certainly, whether that's things like street names or things like that in the future, that's a discussion for our staff to have with them when the plan of subdivision comes in. But in terms of these properties, when we come down to properties being vacant for a long period of time, and again, as it's been alluded to, there's no different set of standards because something is on the cultural registry. I could take you to 3 properties in my ward today that are currently vacant. It's frustrating because even when the owners do secure them, they still face break-ins. They have wires and plumbing ripped out. There's unfortunately all kinds of things that happen with vacant properties, and as much as our enforcement wings and our inspection wings, and I will give a shout out to our London professional firefighters. We often use them to do vacant building checks when they're not busy on other duties. But we just can't be everywhere. And unfortunately, these things happen to abandoned properties, no matter what their age is. So that's the reason, you know, I'm going to be supporting this. Redevelopment does occur. I know I'm going to actually say, Chair, I'll be saying the same things about the next one. Things do change, and it's not always an easy process, but it's one where, in this case, I think the properties are at a state where we have to approve that demolition.
Thank you. Any other comments from committee members or visiting councilors? We have a motion that's been moved and seconded. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to 176 Piccadilly Street. I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Any technical questions for our staff regarding the staff report that we have in front of us on the agenda? Seeing none, then I'll ask if the applicant would like to address the committee. So clerk, if the applicant is online. Okay, thank you. Then I'll open the floor to the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the committee? I'll ask clerk if there's anyone online. No. Last chance. Okay, I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Hopkins, and I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We have a recommendation from a staff. I'll open the to the committee members at this time. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I will move the staff recommendation, but through you, I want to noted that the added communication I wish dealt with separately. It's not my intention to receive that communication.
All right, so the motion that has been moved has been adjusted accordingly. Please refresh your screens to see the motion. I'll look for a seconder for the motion. I'll second the motion. So we have a motion that's been moved and seconded. I'll open the floor now for discussion. Okay, visiting councilors, seeing none, we have a motion moved and seconded. I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I'd like to move that with respect to the communication dated September 15th, 2023 from AM Belastro, that the committee take no action on that item.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Is there a seconder for that motion? Councilor Hillier has seconded. We have motion moved and seconded. Any comments? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I will be very brief. The correspondent alleges that councillors mock efforts by staff. That is, in my opinion, an absolutely false statement. Council's prerogative to agree or disagree with staff is our prerogative as elected officials. When we do not support a staff recommendation, that doesn't mean that we are mocking staff. It means simply we have weighed matters and have reached a different conclusion than staff, and that is our responsibility as elected officials. And that's why no action should be taken on this communication.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councilor Frank.
Thank you. Yes, and this is a question through you to staff. I am wondering, and I think that Councillor Hopkins alluded to it, but I want a bit more straightforward, perhaps, question of, do we have any penalties for demolition by neglect?
I'll go to staff on that question.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm just trying to process how to answer that question, as it is a very nuanced one. And I personally do not administer the property standards bylaw, but trying to share the experience that I've gained. When a property is subject to a property standards order, there's a timeline by which they must either appeal or comply with the remedies that are noted within that order. And if a property owner doesn't take that advantage and opportunity to resolve those issues as identified, there can be administrative monetary penalties assigned to that, or inspection fees that may be incurred related to continued staff visits to monitor that property.
Councillor.
Thank you. That was wonderfully put. To follow up, and then perhaps I'm asking you to speculate, but are there other municipalities that have more heavy-handed enforcement mechanisms for demolition by neglect, more than just property standard bylaws?
I'll go to staff on that one.
Through the chair, and from a heritage perspective, we see a variety of different approaches from other municipalities in Ontario. Unfortunately, demolition by neglect has really been a persistent issue for a variety of factors, as I'm sure you can imagine. As Councillor Hopkins did highlight earlier in her question, to avail of an enhanced minimum standard, a property would have to be designated to avail of those standards where specific heritage attributes could be sought for repair and conservation. Just general property condition is something that's covered within the property standards bylaw for any property. I would reiterate that we are unfortunately working in a reality of complaint-based, and the squeaky wheel does often get the grease. But in terms of other municipalities, we've seen a whole variety of other approaches, from proactive designation without owner consent for properties that are very significant, to increased funding for heritage grants and things like that that will help offset costs for restoration that can help to inspire good work. There's really a variety of suites. There's unfortunately no magic solution, although I wish there were.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, no, that was very helpful. I do personally feel like both of these items on our list have been neglected significantly, leaving us with very little alternative but to approve demolitions. So perhaps moving forward, it's a future discussion for PEC folks. And I'm fine to accept the submission from the resident, as I'm not personally offended by some of the language in it. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions of the motion before us? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-2.
Moving on to 3.3 regarding property at 3030 Singleton Ave. I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Any questions of a technical nature for staff after reading their report that's in our agenda? Seeing none, I'll ask if the applicant is here and would like to address the committee. Please, ma'am, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair, committee, and staff members. I'm Barbara Rosser, planning consultant to Schlegel Villages, and their authorized agent for this application for rezoning under consideration by you tonight. And it's relative to the Village of Glendale Crossing use, located at 3030 Singleton. And of course, it has substantial frontage as well on Southdale Road. Mike Schmidt from Schlegel Villages has also joined the meeting and will be available if there are any questions regarding the proposal. It's to permit what's known as a living classroom or school as defined by the city's current zoning bylaw. And it would be within the development that's nearing completion on the site by way of a special R7 zoning. And the living classroom would be for the purposes of training elder care workers, primarily personal support workers. The building was site plan approved and the building permit issued in 2020. It would occupy a very small proportion of the overall floor area, and the maximum that would be stipulated by the zoning bylaw amendment that's before you would be 600 square meters. It would consist of a skills lab, a simulation lab, classroom, student lounge, and then other related facilities for administration. Would be a basement location, no external indication of the existence of the use, no external changes to the building from what is site plan approved, and there would be more than ample parking on site, even though Schlegel Villages has the practice of not providing for parking and requiring students to take public transit. The benefit of the living classroom is that it provides an opportunity for practical training for the students with the residents directly, and it would be operated in collaboration with a community college. Excuse me. Schlegel Villages is quite experienced with living classrooms, operated in this manner in others of its villages, including Waterloo, Hamilton, Guelph, and Burlington, and it's been a very successful model that predates the pandemic. There's a very strong element of public benefit in this rezoning. It would provide training, as I've noted, for elder care workers that would, in London and its region, that would work in long-term care facilities, hospitals, and in home care, and it would also provide training leading to employment for local people. We've reviewed the staff report and concur with its recommendation and conclusions, in particular that the proposal would be consistent with the PPS and in conformity with the London plan. We are available for questions, and as I've noted, there's a Schlegel Villages representative present, but I would also first like to thank staff who've been of great assistance to us in advancing this application, and we're hopeful of committee support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the committee at this time on this application? I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online.
Through the chair, there's no one online.
Thank you. Seeing no others would like to address the committee, I'll look for a motion to close PPM. Councillor Frank, second by Councillor Hopkins. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I have a staff recommendation. I'll go to Councillor Hopkins.
I'm happy to move the motion.
Motion is moved. Can I look for a seconder? I'll go to Councillor Frank, second. So we have a motion moved and second, and I'll go to Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I just want to, maybe a quick question through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. Is this the first time we're allowing this special provision in, for a living classroom?
Go to staff on that question.
Through the chair, it is the first time, so we kept it under the umbrella of a school use and limited the floor area, just to be basically keeping it as a small footprint, basically.
Councillor?
Yeah, I think this is a great news story almost to, as we become an aging population, I think the need is going to become greater. So I really want to thank the applicant for the innovation, I think, in how we are going to train and employ people in our long-term facilities. So very happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee members? Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Chair. Schlegel villages are well known throughout Western Ontario for their innovative approach to senior care. And this is just one more example of that. This is smack dab in the middle of my ward, so it is a good news story, and I would certainly wholeheartedly support it and ask that members of this committee do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee members? If the committee would permit me, I will just add to what councillors have expressed. I was really excited to see this on our agenda. I think, you know, as our population ages and we move into special care facilities, there is a tendency to be shut off from the world. And I think it's of great value to see the residents engage with our youth, but also for our youth to engage with the elderly folks that will be interacting with on a regular basis. I think both can learn from each other. So thank you for the innovation and that thought, and I hope this will lead to future such endeavors. So thank you. Seeing no other comments or questions from committee or visiting councilors, I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We're now at 3.4, which is 1208 Fanshawe Park Road East. I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
It's time for any technical questions regarding the staff report. Seeing none, I'll see if the applicant would like to address the committee. Please, sir, state your name and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you. Jay McGuffin, Monteith Brown Planning Consultants, Vice President and Principal Planner, here acting as agent for the property owner. We would like to provide full support to the recommendations of staff. We believe that this is an excellent opportunity for infill and intensification along a urban thoroughfare and a primary transit area in the City of London for modest intensification in the area. I'll be available to respond to any questions of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the committee? I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online.
Through the chair, there's no one online.
Thank you. There's one more look around chambers. I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the motion. Call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We have a recommendation from staff. We'll put that on the floor. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Yes, I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation.
Okay, I'll look for a seconder. Councilor Hillier is second. So we have a motion moved and seconded. I'll open the floor for committee members at this time. Councilor Hopkins.
Yeah, I just want to, first of all, thank staff for the internal agency comments. I really appreciate that report. It gives us a lot of information here at committee as to how the process of the application went through, and I really do appreciate it. I'm supportive of the recommendation. In particular, I know there's a number of boundary trees and the challenges going forward. There's 29 trees, and I think most of them, if not all of them, are boundary trees, and how that's going to be dealt with, I think is really important. The movement and the changes, I appreciate the applicant making those changes to accommodate the space, especially to the east and the west. I think bringing forward these units, the intensity. Quick question, maybe through you to staff, is the development of Fanshawe Park Road East for widening, is that being taken into consideration? I know there was a request to ask that question.
Go to staff on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the road widening dedication will be taken essentially at site plan, so there is a requirement. I'm not entirely sure how much that is, but I believe it was maybe detailed in the report under the transportation comments. So there will be a bit of land dedicated to the city for the ultimate road widening, and so therefore that 3-meter setback will be from the ultimate property boundary as well. So that has been taken into consideration.
Sorry, I was a little too quick on there. Councilor. Thank you. Councilor Pribble.
Through the chair to the staff, and thank you for this work as well. And I did meet with our staff, and I'm certainly, as a ward councillor, supporting this project. And I think it's a really good fitting project for infill for this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the motion in front of us? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, moving on, we are at 3.5 regarding 3234 to 3274 Wonderland Road South. I'll look for a motion to open public participation meeting. Deputy Mayor Lewis, look for a second. And Councilor Frank, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any questions of a technical nature on the staff report? I'll ask if the applicant is here. I see you, sir. Please give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Harry Frusios. I'm with Zelenka Priamo Limited, and together with my colleague Taylor Whitney, we are the authorized agents for Southside Construction for this application. We want to thank staff initially for their efforts in bringing forward this application in a timely fashion under some very time-sensitive matters. We want to thank them for their report, and that we support the recommendation that's in front of you this evening. The proposed zoning application would facilitate the construction of a Tesla automotive sales and service establishment on this property. We're also currently in the site plan approval process and hope that in the coming weeks we'll work out the final details of getting that project approved and hopefully construction to commence next spring. We're extremely excited to be part of the process of bringing Tesla to London. This dealership will be the first of its kind in this part of the province west of Kitchener-Waterloo, and it will serve a very large region. It will be one of the largest of its kind in the country. And we hope that council shares in that excitement to bring this development to London. It will be a positive addition to the community as well as the Wonderland Road commercial corridor. You've already been tipped off a little bit already. There are representatives from Tesla that would like to address planning committee. They're attending virtually, so we'll allow them an opportunity to speak shortly. But other than that, Mr. Chair, we're open to any questions you may have, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity to bring forward this application.
Thank you. And I'll ask the clerk, do we have those folks online from Tesla that would like to address the committee?
Yes.
If you can hear me okay, you're welcome to address the committee. You have 5 minutes. Please give us your name and go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Kyle Mazzoni. I'm the real estate manager for Tesla Canada, and I'm thrilled to be in attendance today. Thank you for having me. On behalf of Tesla, we are really excited with the selected site chosen and the great partnership with the Southside Group and the City of London. We are really looking forward to getting up and open for business in 2025 and increasing our presence in Canada and really just seeing more Tesla cars on the road in London.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the committee? I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online.
Through the chair, there's no one online.
Okay, seeing that no one from the gallery is here to address us or online, I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Deputy Mayor Lewis, I have a seconder, please. Councillor Hopkins, and I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
We have a recommendation from staff in front of us, so I will go to the committee on that right now. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. I'm looking for a seconder. Councillor Hillier has seconded the motion. I will put that on the floor for comments or questions. Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is in the heart of wonderful Ward 10, but it's going to affect a large area, much larger than a single City of London ward. The entire city will benefit. Indeed, the entire region of Western Ontario will benefit. My understanding is just at the start will be 50 new jobs, and will certainly grow from there. It's hard to express what a great news story this is for this entire region. So I would humbly ask members of the committee to support this motion going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate the ward councillor's comments. I do have a couple questions through you, Mr. Chair. I guess just starting off with the parking of 504 spaces. I'm not sure if the applicant or the consultant can answer, but just wondering why so many parking spaces, given that we try to encourage transit in this area and just sort of the asphalt and how, just wanting to know why so many?
I'll go to the applicant on the question of the need for parking spaces.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. As I noted in the presentation, as Councillor Van Meerbergen noted, this dealership will not serve just the London, or not just this area, will serve beyond London. So it is anticipated that there will be quite a bit of sales happening for the entire region. So they need this parking, not just for the display of vehicles, but also to transition cars that have been sold so people can come pick them up at an assigned date. Customer parking, there's a number of different components that are required for the parking of this site, and Mr. Mazzone can speak to it as well, but it is part of the business plan to fully utilize the parking that's on this site. Through the site plan process, we will be working with staff to make sure there's an enhanced landscape strip along Wonderland Road to make sure that you're not seeing a lot of the asphalt that's there. But it is, and we've discussed this to length with our client, and it has been told to us that that is the business plan for this site and the nature and extent of this development to have that many parking spaces available for the actual use. Thank you.
Councillor.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. I know This area was sort of designed for commercial development, and it's been empty for many, many years. It's really good to see an alternative land use in this area. I am just a little curious why we aren't able to do that mixed-use development in this area. I'm not sure if the applicant, or maybe through staff, are there opportunities for mixed land use for development in this area as we go forward, given the challenges that we have in our city?
I'll go to staff on that question.
Thank you. Through the chair, these lands are within the Southwest Area Secondary Plan. So that plan is a 50-year type plan. It allows for adaptive reuse over time, planned unit development. So that would contemplate residential or other uses that relate to the policy framework within SWAP. But having said that, as part of this proposal, the focus was on the Tesla and the Tesla building. There are planned units that could be accommodated in the front, but in the interim, they're showing more, we'll say, built-edge type landscape feature, enhanced landscape feature, which the zoning bylaw, the proposed bylaw presents, that allows for this use in the interim. And then over time, we've got policy requirements that would be built into the development agreement in future that would allow for phasing in future. But right now, the focus was for this development site.
Councillor.
Yeah, thank you for that. I will be supporting the recommendation. I'm glad to see, I know parking is always encouraged behind these buildings along this corridor. I'm glad to see the enhanced buffering and landscaping that will sort of soften the area. It's a well-used corridor. And again, I'm glad to see some type of alternative land use, even though I'd like to see more. But it's good to see development happening along the corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Frank.
Thank you, and following up on that vein, just at first glance, the site plan has a nauseating amount of surface level parking. So I'm just wondering if discussions were had with the proponent about doing a building for parking or below ground parking?
I'll go to the applicant.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we have not had those discussions, only because of the nature of the use being an automotive sales and service. They do need to display the cars at grade, so having underground parking wouldn't work really well for that type of business model, but your point is taken.
Councillor.
Thank you, and following up on the site plan recommendations from staff, I'm just wanting to hear a little bit more, I guess, about some of the low impact development that could be occurring on this site. Again, based on this site plan, it looks very unfriendly to pedestrians, and I currently don't really see that much by way of green infrastructure. And as we know, heat island effect is in full force, and we've seen a couple maps recently. As well, following up on that too, I'm wondering about flooding, because we do know this is close to a area that regularly floods. So maybe if you could chat a bit about those two mitigation measures.
I'll go to staff on that.
Thank you. Through the chair, I believe the applicant should be answering these questions.
So I'll go to the applicant on the concerns of the councillor.
Thank you, and through you again, Mr. Chair. These are things we'll be dealing with through the site plan approval stage. We have not received our first round of comments yet. We hope to get those shortly. With respect to flooding, we've already received the comments from the Conservation Authority. They have no concerns with the proposal as been presented, so we don't believe there'll be any issues with that. But again, all the engineering will be dealt with through the site plan stage, and any low impact development will be considered at that stage as well. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you. And then one more follow-up. For the Southwest Area Plan, given that the vast majority of it is giant box stores with humongous parking lots that are empty 90% of the time, I'm just wondering if consideration has been given to that whole area being completely paved over and where the water goes at that point. Is that something that is already planned out in the Southwest Area Plan? Because it is a significant amount of water to essentially be dispersing from those areas that used to be agricultural land, and then reallocating into either stormwater management or into sewers along that area. So I'm just wondering if we've included that in the Southwest Area Plan as well.
So I'll go to staff on that, just stormwater management for not only for this particular property, but for the surrounding areas.
To the chair, it's Peter Kavick. I'm online right now, manager of subdivision and development inspections, just because I'm sick with my kids, unfortunately. To answer the councilor's question, through the engineering review for site plan, we do look at the private permanent system that is designed as part of stormwater to make sure that we attenuate flows based on what the existing pre-development areas are, so that we don't worsen the impact to the environment in the pink cone drain that's near the site. So that's the main intent with site plan, trying to make sure we really match those pre and post flows to not worsen the environmental impact. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I just wanted to confirm. I assume you guys had already thought it all out, but always like to check. And I guess maybe one last question for the applicant. I'm just wondering, so I noticed that there are 504 parking spaces, and given that the Tesla would like to display some of theirs, I'm just wondering, like, how many, they're going to be like 400 cars on display at any given time, or what's the plan there?
I'll go to the applicant. I'm not sure if you would have a number of amount of inventory the end user would be planning, but.
Sorry, and through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have the exact number, but like I said, there's about 4 or 5 different areas of parking, including the sale of vehicles that will be on display for the site. There'll be an area for cars that are being delivered for short-term stay, and people will pick up their vehicle after, because you have to remember, with this type of service, there is online sales as well, in addition to the sales that will be performed on site. So because this is supposed to satisfy an entire region, there will be the needs to have these parkings on the site for a temporary period of time, no different than any other car dealership, but they'll be picked up by the ultimate user of the vehicle at some point. So there's service parking, employee parking, customer parking. There's going to be the charging spaces as well. So there's a various components of the parking. We can get into that detail with staff through the site plan process in terms of how those spaces will be used effectively for the site.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, that concludes all my questions. And I'm having a tough time with this one. I mean, I have an electric vehicle myself. It's not a Tesla, unfortunately. But I find this kind of infrastructure, it's just a good reminder that electric vehicles will not solve our climate change issues, and just replacing like for like does not really do a whole lot when you're going to use this much space simply to store cars. But I'm going to continue to think and maybe listen to some of the debate before I cast my vote. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions from committee or visiting councillors? Councillor Relman.
Thank you, and through you, sorry, can you remind us where the other locations of the Tesla dealerships are right now? I know Kitchener-Waterloo has one, but if you're from the rest of southwestern Ontario, where's the closest? It's just Kitchener-Waterloo? Okay, so if you're in the market for a Tesla right now, most people, I know a couple people have ordered one, I have not. But I know that there is quite a process, and it is nice to have an actual facility to go to and to take a look and be able to look at these vehicles. I understand to the councillor's point and to others' point, I think that there's an opportunity here to, again, put our regional stamp on a facility that would be beneficial for where we're going in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Again, I'm going to try and be brief. It's not my intent to engage in cross debate with Councillor Frank. We can certainly do that afterwards over a libation if she chooses. But I have said this before, and I will say it again. The car is not going away, so the sooner we facilitate it becoming electric, the better. I, too, do not own a Tesla. I can't afford one on what you pay me to be the deputy mayor, but perhaps as we bring some of these facilities closer and we see more purchases and then more aftermarket secondhand ones, maybe I'll be able to afford one of those. I'd like the vehicle that I'm in to be my last gasoline-powered fossil fuel vehicle, but unless we're going to invest and support the infrastructure that supports electric vehicles, that transition is going to be slower than I think it needs to be. So I'm very supportive of this because I think it's a step in the right direction, both in terms of the long-term transportation transition, but also because it's consistent with the Southwest Area Plan and the envisioned uses here. and that there is an opportunity for some future changes to the site as things get developed out. So for all those reasons, I'm very supportive.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to just go one more time. I appreciate everyone's comments. I too had a hard time with this one, but I am going to be supporting it. But I would encourage the applicant to reduce those parking spaces. I just can't imagine 504 asphalt parking spots in this area. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from committee members for visiting? If the committee will allow me, I'll just weigh in here a bit. For me, I don't have any trouble with this one. I think the faster we move to electric vehicles, the better. And just noting where this is located, on the south end of our city, it's near to smaller communities, and smaller communities don't enjoy the same transit that large urban centers like London have. So I think the faster we can get those folks into vehicles with much lower carbon footprint, the better. And I think Tesla's thinking the same. I imagine from the location of this to hit the St. Thomas's of the world and you know, even Chatham and all the way down to Windsor. That will be one less barrier to considering alternative fueled car, essentially. And the other comment I'd like to make is thank you to staff. I heard the applicant say kudos on the timely fashion of getting this through. So good to hear that. So well done, thank you. If there are no further comments or questions, I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to 3.6, which is 1364 to 1408 Hyde Park Road. I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So any technical questions at this time based on the staff report in front of you in our agenda? If not, then I'll look to see if the applicant would like to address the committee at this time. Please, sir, give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Planning Committee. My name is Jerzy Smolarek, and I'm a partner at Civic Planning and Design. We are the authorized agent for the applicant, which in this case is the Municipal Housing Development Division of the City of London. I want to acknowledge that we are in full agreement with planning staff's recommendation brought before you tonight. I want to thank all staff who have taken part of this process. We are proud to have worked closely with Municipal Housing Development staff on this exciting project that seeks to rezone surplus city-owned lands at 1364, 1376, 1390, and 1408 Hyde Park Road to allow for much-needed residential development. Working with Municipal Housing Development staff, Civic was able to help identify highest and best use and layout for the site in keeping with the London Plan, as well as look at opportunities to go beyond the plan to best maximize the number of units based on the existing context and functionality of the site. What you see before you today is a conceptual development plan with accompanying official plan and zoning bylaw amendment to allow for up to 140 units, apartment units, and 17 townhouses. As you've also hopefully seen, we provided a project brief that provides further details and also outlines the comprehensive community engagement strategy that we ran for this application. If there are any questions, I will be here to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments from the public for committee members? Mr. Wallace, you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but first of all, I want to congratulate the city on recognizing property that has the opportunity to become residential, that they may have the ability to put into the marketplace. But my point that I really wanted to make, other than the two first public participation meetings, the rest were rezoning. Now, there's an OPA in this last application that from the city, but the rest were ZBAs, zoning bylaw amendments, that in reality were relatively, I think from the public's perspective and based on who showed up, were relatively minor. My point is this: when it comes to rethink zoning, we need to have a more flexible, inclusive zoning bylaw. So we are not, the applicants tonight would have spent a minimum of 12 grand plus another process delay in terms of moving forward on their projects. We think that these are the kinds of things that a more flexible zoning bylaw would allow to happen faster, and a lot of the decisions that need to be made or will still be done at site plan, but would not take up your time, not take up the time of the proponents, and move things along faster for the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online that would like to address the committee.
Through the chair, there's no one online.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last chance. Oh. Anyone from the public? Last call. Okay, I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Deputy Mayor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
I'm just going to go to staff based on the comments from Mr. Wallace regarding, I know you're working on rethink zoning right now. There's no specific question here, and you do not have to say anything if you don't want. But if you just want to give the opportunity to, maybe give us some of your thoughts.
Through the chair, we absolutely agree that we would like to have less of these zoning applications come forward. And it's actually tomorrow we'll have an opportunity to provide a little bit more detail to council as part of our Housing Accelerator Fund application. We have some very specific zoning changes that we're bringing forward to support that application that will be doing a lot of the things that Mr. Wallace has suggested. So stay tuned, and we'll also have an update on the Rethink report process for the Rethink zoning in the next month as well, to give you some ideas on what you're going to see ahead there as well.
Yeah, I think, the comments that we heard are valid, and so I look forward to, the update on the Rethink zoning process. It's timely, given the fantastic news we received from the federal government. And I'm looking forward tomorrow to hearing that report to SPPC. And again, kudos to staff, because more will be said tomorrow night. But just from the chair of this committee, I think we are moving in the right direction. And I think the announcement from the federal government indicated that from their standpoint. So I just wanted to say keep up the good work. We have a motion, or we have a recommendation from staff. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation. I was going to save my comments for tomorrow night as well for SPPC, but I'm going to take this opportunity to say I'm really glad that Mr. Mathers and Ms. McNeely and Mr. Pease, and I know you weren't the only ones involved, but I'm glad you got to join us last week for that announcement. And I know it's because of the incredible hard work that your teams did to advance the application as quickly as you did and as ambitiously, and I note the comments that we heard from federal leaders about how this has set a new bar for other municipalities to strive to match. So I want to take that opportunity to just say kudos to all of you and thank you for all the, I can't even guess if we could total up the hours of extra work that you put into this while doing your other job on top of everything else. So thank you for that. Happy to move this application. I would like to speak to it for a moment, but I'll look to see if there's a seconder first.
Okay, I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Frank. So we have a motion moved and seconded, now open for a conversation. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. So very happy to see this coming forward as redevelopment potentially for affordable housing. This is really key, and it's really consistent with our council policy that before we dispose of any property at the city, we send it through the Municipal Housing Division to see if it's appropriate for affordable housing. This proposal looks not dissimilar to one in my own ward at 1958 Duluth Crescent with some mix of mid-rise and townhouse uses involved. I know that there was some pushback from some members of the community, but you know, my response to that was affordable housing belongs in every neighborhood in this city. It's not just you know, something that we put all in one corner of the city. It's something that belongs everywhere. And the people who work in, you know, the retail sector or the service sector in this neighborhood deserve an opportunity to live there just as much as the residents who are utilizing those services, whether it's the people pouring your coffee or the folks, I know nobody wants to think about it, but pretty soon the season will be upon us to change our tires for snow tires, or any of the other number of service and retail uses that we see in this area of the city. The employees there deserve a chance to have a home there too, so that they don't have to rely on, you know, 45 minutes or an hour and 2 transfers of transit to get to their jobs. And so I'm really excited to see this opportunity being brought forward on this parcel of land. I think it's a great proposal. I think it's a good use of this space, and it has been in the city's hands since 2013, and it's time that we do something with it. So very, very supportive of that.
Thank you. Other, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, it's pretty hard not to support this application, and my thanks to staff and the applicant as well. I think the applicant has done a very good job here in providing that extra bit of park space, the amenity space that's going to be required, reduced parking, important things, not only the affordable housing piece. I hopefully will get some improved transit in this area as well as we develop and create opportunities for transit, but also the open space zones too, sort of keeping them in place and protecting them. So very supportive of this application. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, and through you. So I have some comments and some questions. First, I want to start by thanking Mr. Maitland, Civic, and the planning team for their work on this application. I'm supportive of the need for affordable housing in the ward and across the city. In Ward 7, there have only been 8 affordable housing units approved, 4 in 2012 and 4 in 2015. So you can see there is definitely a need in this ward. I'd like to thank the residents and neighbors who took the time to reach out about this proposal, and I appreciate the questions that have come forward. I'm going to go through some of the questions that have been received. I'm not sure why, but some people had called or reached out today saying they were going to be part of tonight's PPM, so I'm not sure if they just didn't get a chance to access or something. So I want to make sure that their questions are addressed. So my first question is something that a number of residents have brought up. And I know this would be dealt with in site plan, but I just wanted to ask if it's possible to comment at all. There's a lot of concern around the traffic on Hyde Park Road and the fact that this would be a difficult property to access and therefore create more traffic challenges on Prince of Wales Gate, and South Carriage Road. So the concern is that if you were traveling north on Hyde Park, how would you access the one access that's being proposed in this plan?
I'll go to staff on that question.
Through the chair, sorry, it's Peter Kavick again. I was just coordinating with the team. I'm online, manager subdivision development inspections. Just to reiterate the question, to make sure I have it accurately, Councillor, it's for pedestrians traveling northbound or vehicles traveling northbound on Hyde Park and then accessing into the subdivision or site plan, sorry.
Councillor.
Thank you. So it's for vehicle access. My understanding is it's a single entrance and exit off of Hyde Park. And so if this is if somebody's traveling north, how would they access this particular location without perhaps turning around onto South Carriage and then having to then turn around?
Yes.
I'll go to staff.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification. I now understand the question. Through the chair, as part of the transportation impact assessment, through traffic volumes, the site plan would review the end solution. Some potential options are to remove what's the center median right now, to consider, an access through that median and to allow those left turns to access. But without doing the transportation impact assessment, it's a bit premature to see if that would be the solution. Another option could be a signal, but with the signal at Hyde Park and South Carriage, the TI would also review that. Unfortunately, there's a number of options, but we would want to make sure through that traffic impact assessment that they're all vetted appropriately and that it does provide a safe, comfortable access to all residents and homeowners that live in this area. Hopefully that answered a bit of your question, Councillor.
Councillor.
Thank you. Follow up, and I'll move quickly through my questions. There is a property right next door to this where when they were going through the application, the height was restricted to 4 stories. And in this proposal, the height is set at 6 and 7. I'm just wondering why the properties next door were restricted in height, but these two aren't.
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, the property to the north made their application for 4 stories. There was no restriction on the 5 or 6. They just applied for 4 stories.
Councillor.
Thank you. I think that takes care of a lot of the questions that came from the neighborhood. But one that I have been struggling with that I have not been able to answer or get an answer for residents is around the use of the site. So I understand that through our policy, when we gain access to a property, that through our policy on the sale and disposition of the land, that we would look at affordable housing first. And I understand that policy. I also understand that we have a need for land in the Northwest. And I'm just wondering if this site was considered for the possibility of a community facility. And the reason I'm asking that is, again, because as we're looking at the Northwest, we're looking at the great need that we have for community facilities in the area. I want to ensure that we're looking at the highest and best use, and whether that's a mixed-use facility on that property that could be both a community facility and housing. I think I'd want to understand that we went through that process to evaluate it against our criteria for a community facility.
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair. So just a step back, what we go through when any of these properties come available. So absolutely, the councillor is correct that the first thing we look at is what that property could be used for. So as far as our OP and our own strategic choices that we make as far as land, if we can use that land for affordable housing, knowing that we have a roadmap to 3,000 units, and just how important new housing is and how limited the supply of land to be able to provide that housing is, then we will start from there to be able to move forward with this process that you're seeing today. So there is a recreational master plan where they go through the process to identify locations. This property was not identified as one of those locations. So what we brought forward to today is an application for that affordable housing. So absolutely, there's always opportunities to look at different properties, but this one was brought forward strictly for affordable housing.
Counselor?
Thank you. Yes, so this property was brought forward strictly for affordable housing, therefore was not considered a possibility for a community facility. I'm not a member of this committee, so I can't move a motion, but I would like to put this forward for consideration of a possibility if someone's willing to move it as an amendment. I think it's incumbent on us to consider how we use the land that we have, especially as we've been building out the Northwest. We have very little possibility for where we can put a community center, and I think we have to consider everything that we have. So I'm hoping that someone would consider moving an amendment, a D, let's say, to the what's in front of us, and that is for the consideration that Civic Administration be directed to evaluate the property at 1364 through 1408 Hyde Park for a mixed use of both residential and a community facility, and that the property be evaluated against the criteria for a community facility. I know it's not something we've done before, that we haven't evaluated a property for both, but I'm asking that we think outside the box in this case and think about the possibility where we do not have a lot of land, of how we have the best possible use for the land. With Canterbury Park backing onto this property, I think it's a possibility. The fact that this property is almost similar size to the Canadian Aquatic Centre facility, the Canada Games facility that we have as well, and I think that it should be looked at and at least evaluated against the criteria. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. So I appreciate the ward councillor's comments and the desire to see, community facilities developed in her part of the city as well. The Northwest Community Centre has long been discussed since the 2019 update to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan at least. But I'm not going to support asking staff to consider this site at this time. And I want to share a couple reasons for that, because I don't want to suggest that I don't appreciate where the councillor is coming from. But my understanding is that we have 6 or 7 other city-owned properties that we are evaluating for community center use in the Northwest. That typically we're looking for 6 to 10 acres of land. This parcel here is 4. I recognize Canterbury Park is adjacent, but then we do start losing green space. And I say that as somebody who, I'm lucky to have a beautiful community center in my ward, but we did sacrifice green space to get it, to the size that we have. But more importantly, 2024 is the year for the update to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And to ask us to start looking at this now, to get a feasibility study to discuss what components would fit in here. And I think at best we would get, at best, a mid-sized facility. So there would be some sacrifices made on potentially what components get included, because we wouldn't necessarily have the land to do everything that might be ideal in a Northwest Community Center. But we're nowhere near having all the funding worked out. We've got a multi-year budget process coming up. There was an application made to the federal government in the last term of council for some infrastructure funding to advance some community center projects faster. That unfortunately was not approved by the federal government, so we still have a fairly long timeline on some of these builds. And so, plus we have to have discussions with like the library, the YMCA, other potential community partners, because we we're now looking at doing a lot of co-builds on these kind of things, not just standalones on their own. And so with all that goes into that, and knowing that there are some other municipal properties that are already being evaluated for their feasibility, I wouldn't want to add work and hold up what's already a good plan for affordable housing on what I think, based on the size of the parcel already, would come back as a, this isn't gonna work for us as a community facility anyway, when other sites are being actively evaluated. So certainly when the opportunity comes to approve a Northwest Community Center, I'm going to be fully supportive of the councillor's desire to see that happen, as I was in the last term and will continue to be, because I think everybody deserves an East Lyons type community center in every part of the city where possible. But I think we have to move forward with this one. I think there's other opportunities for community centers here, and I don't want to add work to staff's load on an evaluation where other sites are already being considered.
Other comments or questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, just a couple questions. So my first question is around other sites being evaluated in the Northwest area. I hear the councillor's request. So I don't know if they are or not, so maybe that's my first question. And my second question is, with the added amendment to consider an evaluation, I'm not thinking the evaluation would be a feasibility study and all that. What is the criteria? Because I did hear from Mr. Mathers that housing, affordable housing, meeting those targets are important. That's what we consider. That's what we have here. That's what I am supporting. But I would like to have a better understanding of the councillor's concerns in her community. Number one, sites. Number two, is there a delay in the evaluation of this property to look at that mixed use?
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, so we don't have anyone to attend from our Parks and Recs area, so I won't be able to speak to what they're currently looking at. However, the one item that I can speak to is just the timeliness. So absolutely an evaluation could be done. If that so then I go down to the scenario if it says yes or no. If it said no, then that we can progress this fairly streamlined way. If it did say yes, which I don't know what it's going to say, I'm just concerned about the timeliness. So if we're looking at constructing or designing recreational facilities, that's pushing the construction of affordable housing on this property out years. Like it is. This is probably the lowest hanging fruit we have of all of our affordable housing projects right now, that we can actually get out there and build some stuff. So that's my primary concern. I very much would value, and I know the community would value this recreational opportunity here as well. My concern is just the timeliness.
Councillor.
Thank you for that. And with that, I would not sort of accommodate an amendment to the recommendation. But I do think it's important to understand, maybe from a parks perspective, what the needs are in the community of the councillor's request. And given that staff is not here to speak to that, I can follow up with them at a later time. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions from committee members? If the committee will allow me, then I'll weigh in. Councillor Almond's suggestion for amendment, I totally understand where she's coming from. The Northwest, for as long as I've been here, has been promised at some point a community center. And what I've heard is that there's lack of land available. So I understand where she's coming from, and I share that because my ward is not as north, but part of I would call the Northwest, just a little south of that. We are lacking in those facilities, which I've had conversations with staff on prior. What concerns me is funding. Which comes first? Do we set a site and then go about finding the money? It sounds like we tried. And unfortunately, at that particular time, weren't fortunate enough to find access to federal funding. And just the timing, given that huge announcement that we just had and the emphasis right now on housing, especially affordable housing, pretty hard to delay a really good example of a affordable housing build in a property right now that's sitting vacant and could be used. So at this time, I will not be putting forth that amendment. But I think the councillor raises some very good, raises a really good, interesting aspect of, you know, considering mixed use. We talk about mixed use. We talk about commercial, residential mixed use. Maybe we have to start considering residential and community center use. You know, it's especially where land and space is dear in the Northwest. I kind of, the more I mull it over, as Councillor was speaking, I kind of see the logic behind that. You know, community facilities with community housing, sharing. Maybe the opportunity is for economies of scale, sharing resources, et cetera. I don't know. Might be an interesting avenue to go down. So what I would like to do with the councillor maybe at a later time is to talk to staff maybe about possibilities and to drill down on the sites that were mentioned by the deputy mayor, you know, to see where we can get this ball rolling again, because I understand housing, but, you know, we look 10, 15 years down the road, what is a community? Community has different aspects. There's commercial, residential, but there's also city-owned facilities that add to the experience of living in our city. So I look forward to those discussions at a later date. So before I call the vote, last chance for any more comments or questions. Councillor?
Thank you, and through you. I mean, I've only been on council for less than a year now, and I'll tell you, almost every other council meeting is an application in Ward 7. And with all the growth that we've seen in the ward, where have we considered the needs for recreation? Where have we considered the needs for community space? Where have we considered infrastructure needs? Where have we considered our school needs? We are seeing increasing growth. I feel like I meet with a developer almost every other week about an application that is about to come forward to this committee. And what I hear is, Councillor, you need to wait till we're ready to have that conversation about where we can possibly put a community center. What I'm saying is we have a piece of city-owned property. I understand there's concerns that it might be too small. We own the adjacent properties. We own the park. If you look at the East Lions, I was there yesterday. I looked at the facility. You know, if you look at the Canadian Aquatic Games, they're almost identical in size to this piece of property. And I'm not talking about not going forward with the affordable housing. I'm saying, how do we best use the pieces of land that we have available to us? So I welcome the opportunity. I will be looking to my fellow councillors when we start to have those conversations about the Northwest and about the community center needs. But I will say that, you know, this is a significant parcel in a great neighborhood. There is a park backing onto it and green space. You know, the rest of the ward, we have challenges with transit. We did not approve transit in the north and the west for rapid transit. And so here we are. And so, again, I would welcome the amendment. I'll try again at council and we'll see where we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions before I call the vote? We have motion moved and seconded. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, where is it? So we have no items for direction. And we have one item, deferred matters. The 10th report of the Community Advisory Committee on Planning. That was added. So I'll put that on the floor now for committee members. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to receive that.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any comments or questions? Then I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. That includes the public portion. We do have a confidential in camera. So I'll ask the clerk to prepare the room for 6.1.